Everyone, my name is Alexa, and I will be discussing media surveillance in the digital age for my final presentation. And I used the movies Snowden and Enemy of the State to describe this concept. So, though these movies have to do with more government agencies being involved with media surveillance, I define media surveillance as the monitoring or collection of personal data through online resources or digital technologies. So anything that has to do with tracking our location services that we see that feature on our iPhones, monitoring the sites that we go on, the products that we interact with, all of this is media surveillance. And in one way or another, this information is being given to a company or a government agency, and it's at the risk of our privacy and our rights, as sometimes we don't even consent to this and it's happening right under our noses. So it's important to talk about, and I think it's a very interesting topic, and these movies portray it very well. The movies, I wanted to discuss some real world examples of how media surveillance can change individuals' behaviors, whether it's in a physical sphere or a digital realm. There is a certain level of self censoring that comes about when people perceive that they're being monitored or watched, per se. So even though people may not have anything to hide, they fear that their actions on digital spaces might leave behind a digital footprint that can follow them forever, because essentially the internet is forever. Long after any post is deleted or anything happens to it, it still could be accessed in some way or another by some company or some agency somewhere. So it's important to consider that though we don't want to be misperceived, we go about it in a way that isn't unethical and protects people's rights, essentially. An everyday example that I've experienced and I think we can all attest to is how annoying targeted ads are. No matter if you're looking for a blender, a new hairdryer, a new a new piece of clothes that you want to buy, within almost an hour you see floods of this product on your social media, on any website that you visit afterwards. And it really raises the question of how much control do we have over our information and over our preferences? Because I didn't consent to that being released. However, it is, and however, I now become part of a marketing campaign that is targeted towards monetization and essentially just capitalistic gain. So, that is important also to consider and can also affect the way that people perceive the media and also their phones in general. Into the movies. The first one, Snowden, which I highly recommend anyone here watches because I watched it about 3 or 4 years ago and it really opened my eyes up to this whole topic and how prevalent it really is and how we really have no control over it. So essentially the plot follows Edward Snowden, who it's based on a true story. He was a former NSA contractor and he also worked in the CIA. Over the years he built status and rose up in the ranks of the government. So essentially after the 9/11 attacks, he became increasingly aware of the fact that the government was heavily surveilling US citizens, and not just criminals, national threats, terrorists. It was ordinary civilians. It could have been anyone they wanted to tap into, they could have. So the clip I chose shows footage of an NSA analyst who they're trying to dig up dirt on a very high profile national person who they think is a national threat, and they're trying to dig up dirt on him essentially through going through his family's Facebook, their personal information, and essentially he is able to tap into the feed of his sister-in-law's webcam computer, even though the computer is off and in Paris, France at the moment. So the scope of this really goes to show how we truly have no say in how these digital technologies are used against us. And even in moments that we don't think that we're being surveilled, or even if we're not suspecting people, or we haven't committed any real crimes or have a criminal history, we still are at risk of this. The next clip comes from Enemy of the State, and it also shows how technology can be used against us in a second if we're deemed a threat, or if any government agency really feels the need to, they can tap into our phones and surveil us. So the plot follows a lawyer who accidentally stumbles across a very, very deep secret about the CIA, and that can potentially bring them down. So just for discovering the secret, he is heavily surveilled, his phones are tapped into, he is being watched through street cameras, elevator cameras, And the clip even mentions that the NSA knew the time on his watch. So this really raises the question, how and why do these agencies choose to surveil, and if so, should there be ethical considerations behind it? Like, it's not okay to be surveilling an ordinary citizen just because they found something of this nature out, but it's believable, like it's plausible, and it kind of foreshadows how the technologies can be used negatively against us if we don't put proper ethical consideration behind it. To study this topic because, as we learned in class, surveillance can be used to target specific individuals and races and ethnicities. For example, after 9/11, there was a heavily monitoring of Muslim populations and their online conversations within the US, of course, and this essentially completely changes the way that they use the internet, the way that they interacted in their daily lives, as even their mosques were being surveilled and monitored, and it completely radicalized their everyday routines. And that essentially is not okay. When media and technology is being used against a whole ethnicity and marginalizing a whole group of people, we need to consider how this is affecting society and the way that it's enabling power positions. So essentially, that is why I chose this topic. I think it's very interesting and very essential to the current climate of our world. Thank you for watching.